Fierravanti-Wells.
Mr Acting Deputy President, I rise this evening to once again speak on the important issue of religious freedom. Recently I launched a petition on behalf of Australians of faith or not of faith for a Religious Freedom Act, and I take this opportunity to once again thank the people of Australia for supporting my petition. I have been humbled by the outpouring of support from people right across Australia. I encourage all who believe in freedom of speech to continue to sign and mail the petition to my electorate office as soon as possible and as often as possible as well. As I continue to meet with religious leaders and their communities, they continually voice their concerns about their institutions and staff at their various centres, facilities and charitable organisations being closed down or the risk of losing their jobs, and the reason for this being because they have expressed their beliefs or values. And the need for positive religious freedom laws is due to the growing body of cases in Australia of people having their freedom of speech, conscience, thought and religion eroded, one person at a time, one case at a time. Organisations such as the Australian Christian Lobby and the Institute for Civil Society have been cataloguing the growing number of cases of religious discrimination and religious freedom incursions over several years. And organisations such as the Human Rights Law Alliance have been representing and defending the rights and religious freedoms of individuals and organisations in various courts throughout Australia. As I did last week, I would like to spend some time to highlight cases in Australia of discrimination that do not receive any attention from mainstream media, yet they are important because, as I said last week, it could be you or I on the next occasion. Jamie, not his real name, is a Christian and a supporter of traditional marriage. He is also a teacher at a government school. He shared articles from various sources about same-sex marriage and offered his own alternative views. Complaints were made to his school about him being homophobic. Consequently, Jamie was placed under investigation by the Department of Education for alleged breaches of discipline. He sought legal advice and negotiations took place with the Education Department. The investigation was subsequently dropped, but there were no adverse findings against Jamie. Another case relates to freedom of speech and street preaching. Caleb Cornerlope, his real name, is a street evangelist who has been preaching for several years. He applied to Launceston City Council for a permit to conduct street preaching and evangelistic activities in the City Mall. However, Launceston City Council declined his permit. Consequently, he sought legal advice from the Human Rights Law Alliance against this local council prohibition in the federal court. He argued such a decision was not properly made, was discriminatory on the grounds of religion and was invalid by reason of the implied freedom of political communication in the Australian Constitution. He was successful and the council granted him a permit to evangelise in the City Mall. Michelle Fraser, and this is her real name, is a woman who is a pro-life advocate and has been personally affected by abortion. She decided to stand on a Melbourne footpath in the vicinity of an abortion clinic and hold images of a dead fetus. She wanted expectant mothers who are considering an abortion to know that an unborn child is a living human being. Consequently, a police officer fined Michelle. She was charged with a criminal offence of displaying an obscene figure in a public place. After she was convicted in the Melbourne Magistrates Court, the Alliance provided legal assistance and challenged the decision in both the County Court and the Supreme Court of Victoria. Lawyers argued the image was not obscene because it was comparable to a shocking image of a political or health warning nature. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court of Victoria upheld the decision, finding the image was obscene and disgusting. Now, this is particularly relevant given the protests that we are now seeing outside the New South Wales Parliament and in what, if I can quote Minister Damien Tudorhope in an opinion piece in the Sydney Morning Herald today, in what he described, and I quote, the most extreme abortion laws in the country, perhaps in the world, including unrestricted abortion until the moment of birth. I move to another example. Maria, not her real name, is a medical general practitioner. She is a doctor who has conscientious convictions about various issues, including family and bioethics. She was approached by a couple wanting to utilise IVF services. Maria explained such medical procedures were not within her area. The couple requested a referral to see another doctor, which she declined. Consequently, the couple lodged an official complaint against her with the medical board, alleging she had unfairly discriminated against them in her practice of medicine. The medical board ruled the complaint was without bias, and this is an important win for the freedom of conscience of doctors. Neil Atchison is a Christian pastor in Adelaide. He strives to assist the poor in his area. He also travels regularly to Myanmar and India to empower local people to build small businesses to reduce poverty. His Sanctuary Surf business raises money to support these initiatives. The shop displays products with Bible quotes and Christian paraphernalia. In 2016, a journalist visited his shop and found amongst the stock items T-shirts bearing the word "Love is a Choice." An article followed in a local newspaper titled "Sanctuary Surf Causes Waves of Offence." The article alleged the shirt was intended to be a homophobic hate message. It also attacked Neil on other grounds. The allegations were not true. Consequently, with the publication of the article, the shop was several times vandalised, his front windows were smashed, and he was inundated with prank telephone calls. When Neil went to speak to the local newspaper about the article, the police were called, and they promptly arrived and removed him for allegedly trespassing. Now, he sought legal advice on this, and the Alliance was able to help Neil in obtaining an appropriate settlement for defamation and his associated losses. Now, all these examples demonstrate the same characteristic: the victims innocently exercising their rights to express their freedom of speech, of conscience, of thought and religion. They did not resort to forms of intimidation, harassment, persecution or violence. Unfortunately, they were targets of the same and had to resort to legal avenues to reassert their rights as Australian citizens. Now, one would think that this should not be happening in Australia, but it is, and future cases like this are not going to disappear with the enactment of a minimalist Religious Discrimination Act. These cases can only be averted with the enactment of a full suite of religious protection provisions, such as a Religious Freedom Act. Can I conclude with a reiteration and my plea to those quiet Australians of family and faith to write to their local MPs? I refer again to what's happening in New South Wales, and what is especially galling about what is happening in New South Wales at the moment is the fact that, as has been outlined in today's Daily Telegraph in an exclusive article, that the MP pushing this actually consulted with the government and consulted with the Premier, but as I have been told by various people, there has not been the adequate time for consultation. And so, as Minister Tudorhope has urged people, and I would support his plea, please contact your local MP. Make sure that you give them an earful, because, as he says in his piece today, legislators from across the political divide, and I quote, tried to ride roughshod over the parliamentary procedure and pass abortion laws that barely anyone in the state has ever heard of. And so, as he states, if you and people of faith and family do not communicate these issues and do not communicate to your MP about your concerns, you too will be written roughshod in future months as this bill comes before the Parliament. Can I conclude by thanking the many, many people who have written to me, who have given me support, but more importantly, who are writing to their MPs urging them to act.